This is the entrance to decommissioned Titan I nuclear missile base. It also happens to be where I grew up. Well, sort of. Let me explain. In the late 1940s, not long after World War II had ended, there began a time known as the Cold War. The Cold War was a state of political and military tension between the Soviet Union and the Western Allies, dominated by the United States, kind of like two kids facing off on a playground. Although the Cold War officially dates between 1947 and 1991, I'm going to focus on the period between 1957 and 1965. It's when commercials like this played on TV.
Sundays, holidays, vacation time, we must be ready every day, all the time, to do the right thing if the atomic bomb explodes. Duck and cover. This family knows what to do, just as your own family should. They know that even a thin cloth helps protect them. Even a newspaper can save you from a bad burn. But the most important thing of all is to duck and cover yourself.
Not that hiding under a blanket would help, but it's the thought that counts, right? On October 4, 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first satellite to ever make it into space. It was a big wake-up call to the US because it meant that if the Soviet Union could put a satellite in orbit, they could drop a nuclear bomb anywhere on Earth. The US retaliated in 1959 by building ICBM missiles, like the one seen here.
At Cape Canaveral, the nation's newest ICBM intercontinental ballistic missile is ready for its maiden flight. The Air Force's 90-foot missile is more powerful and technically more sophisticated than the Atlas, which is nearing operational status. But the two-stage Titan is still in the development stage. Its ultimate range will be possibly as much as 9,000 miles. But in this initial firing, only the first stage engine will be tested. The second stage is essentially a dummy for proper balance. It's a test with limited objectives, and every precaution that can be taken is taken. The 110-ton missile will be held on the launching stand for 6 seconds following ignition to be sure that there is no initial misfire in the crucial first moments of flight. The vastly complex countdown nears completion, and the moment of truth is at hand for the Titan. After a perfect launching, the Titan thunders downrange. Estimates of its flight, a maximum altitude of 50 miles, a horizontal reach of perhaps 200 miles. Most important of all, buffeted though it was by 40-mile-an-hour gusts, the Titan never wavered in its flight. The mammoth engine, with some 300,000 pounds of thrust, never faltered. Evaluation of this maiden flight, over 90% successful. A major stride in America's missile program.
As a result, 18 nuclear missile launch facilities, known as Titan I nuclear missile bases, were built in Washington, California, South Dakota, Idaho, and Colorado. Construction began on the Titan I I played in as a child in 1959 and ended in 1962. By the end of the 2.5 years of construction, millions of US dollars had been spent in the construction of 16 underground buildings. And on April 1, 1962, the facility became operational. This missile base was equipped with 3 of the first-generation SM-68 Titan I intercontinental ballistic missiles, with a mission of nuclear deterrence. The idea was MAD, which stands for Mutually Assured Destruction. You destroy us, we'll destroy you. In other words, if the Soviet Union decided to launch a nuclear attack, the United States would retaliate by launching its own nuclear attack. It's like in an action movie, when there is a standoff and two guys have guns pointed at each other, and you wonder who's gonna shoot first. Except, instead of two guys, it's the Soviet Union and the United States. And instead of guns, it's nuclear weapons. The power of the nuclear weapons built by the United States and the Soviet Union had, and still has, the power to destroy most of life on Earth. Yeah, mad was a good term for it. It's important to note that 1962 was not only the year this Titan I became operational, but was also the year of the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a 13-day political and military standoff in October of 1962 over the installation of nuclear-armed Soviet missiles on Cuba, just 90 miles from the United States, as President Kennedy describes here.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere.
During this crisis, nukes were ready to launch from the very missile base I spent time in. The world, quite literally, was on the brink of nuclear war. Thankfully, disaster was avoided when the United States agreed to the Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev's offer to remove the Cuban missiles in exchange for the United States promising not to invade Cuba. Kennedy also secretly agreed to remove United States missiles from Turkey. This missile base was only in operation for 2.5 years, from 1962 until 1965. It was shut down when the new Titan II missile bases came online. When it was decommissioned, the nuclear missiles were removed and the base was scrapped. Sometime after 1965, the base was sold as surplus real estate and ultimately came under the care of this guy. That's my dad. Since the mid-90s, my dad has been taking my 3 brothers and me to this missile base to both work and play. Over the years, the base has been in a number of news articles and segments. And after hearing the story of this base told by so many strangers, I decided it was time you heard from me.
Now it's 2016, and I thought it was about time that I show you this missile base.